Thanks so much for talking to me. Yeah, so I've spent several days during the past week watching a lot of your videos. It's been very interesting, and I guess there's like three different sort of categories of things that you've been talking about on these Idea City videos and various other things that you put your ideas out through. One is green technology, another one is disruption, and then I guess the other one is kind of like how we don't see the next big change coming. Is that sort of fair assessment? Is there anything else that you're kind of working on right now?
Those sound great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, really interesting stuff. I was talking with Svein Tveitel the other week, and we were talking about green technology. I learned a whole lot there, but yours was from sort of a slightly different. The stuff you've been talking about, at least that I've seen, is from a slightly different point of view. You're very interested in how technology needs to be green in order to be efficient and for companies to be profitable, right? That's the basic.
Well, that's one of the benefits, yeah.
So I mean, everything from like painting roofs white to improving the efficiency of planes by 1% to to actually make a profit on your airline instead of losing money and trying to sell peanuts to make up the difference. So it's very interesting.
Well, that one's really interesting because just a 1% increase in fuel efficiency would double the airline's profitability globally.
Unbelievable.
The airline industry profit. And the average trip on an airline makes only $8. So when they're trying to sell you the peanuts for $4, they're working to increase their profit by 50%. That's what they're doing.
And why is that? Is that because there's so much competition? Because there are centralized sites which sell the same people different flights and people just choose on price? Is that the reason for that?
There are too many reasons to go into here, but it is a very capital intensive industry. And therefore how efficiently you use your capital is very important. And companies like Southwest Airlines are more profitable than the industry by a major factor. In fact, Southwest after 9/11 was worth more than all the other airlines in North America added together.
Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Because it flies point to point, not hub and spoke. And they turn around their planes in 1/3 the time of the industry. So if they turn planes in 60 minutes instead of 20, they'd need twice the size of fleet to fly the same number of flights. So very important thing for the airline industry is ROIC, return on invested capital. So how efficiently are we using our capital? Or to put it another way, McDonald's in North America sells more than 50% of its sales through its drive-through window, which means they're very efficient at return on invested capital because they just knocked a hole in the side of the building, painted a line on the parking lot, and then put a squawk box up, and were able to double their sales.
It's shocking. Yeah, that's shocking. Also, they don't have to have cleaning staff, right?
No, you're the cleaning staff. You are the cleaning staff. You clean the washrooms too, and you pay for the garbage disposal.
That's right, yeah. And actually, I guess it's becoming things like Apple Pay must really help companies like McDonald's in that way, because if you don't have to take someone's card, take a PIN, for example, or if you don't have to swipe, get a signature and so on, that's just improving the drive-through throughput drastically, right? So that's only good for them.
Yes.
Tap your watch, tap your phone, whatever. That's cool.
Yeah, this is why tap is important for merchants, right? Who are selling with high volume.
I suppose so. Generally speaking, it is, yeah. So, what are some other? I think the videos I've seen of you talking about green technology, they seem to be some of your earlier videos. and I'm just wondering what has changed since you started exploring this field. I mean, you've been in green for a long time, right?
Long time.
Yeah.
So globally, solar power is now at 1% of global electricity supply, and 1% is a frightening number. And I'll explain why. I want you to think about a pond where there are lily pads, and the lily pads are doubling every day. So on day 1, there's 1 lily pad. On day 2, there are 2 lily pads. On day 3, there are 4 lily pads. Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, now on day 30, the entire pond is covered with lily pads. Okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
One day before, how much open water is there?
What one day before so hang on.
It's entirely covered.
Oh, okay. One day before it's covered. I mean, intuitively, it feels like it would be 90%, but I suspect you're going to tell me something shocking.
Remember, it's doubling every day.
Oh, so doubling. Sorry. Yeah.
So one day before, how much open water?
50%.
Right, and one day before that, how much
25.
open water?
Sorry, 75. Yeah.
Right, and a day before that, 84.25. You go back 7 days. So on day 23, there's 99% open water. So you've seen this progression, and you go and run around to everyone in your industry and say, beware, the lily pond is about to be run over with lilies.
Nobody's going to listen. Everyone thinks you're mad.
And they look at the pond, and there's 99% open water, and they look at you, and they say, you are mad. So
yeah, absolutely.
What is the challenge? The challenge is when you have exponential growth, once you get to 1%, it only requires 7 more doublings. So solar power is at 1% globally, and it's been doubling every 2 years for 40 years.
Wow.
So 7 more doublings, 14 more years, solar can be 100% a global power supply. But you go to somebody who's a nuclear energy planner and say, what's the energy future look like? And they say, it's going to be nuclear.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because solar is just only 1%. You see, in North America already, solar is the largest form of new power. And we just had in, I think it was Dubai, a solar bid come in at 2.41 cents per kilowatt hour for 100 megawatts of power. It's already cheaper than any other form of power you can institute. It's already cheaper in every island nation in the world because they used to burn bunker fuel, diesel to generate their electricity. Solar is way cheaper. So within 1 or 2 years, solar will be on grid parity in more than 80% of jurisdictions globally. So we're about to see that explosion, but nobody in the electricity sector can see it because there's 99% open water.
That's good. It's good to be in that inner circle, but so 7 years. You said it's going to be it's going to
7 doublings.
7 doublings. So it's a doubling.
It's every 2 years it's doubling.
Oh, okay, so 14 years. Okay,
so 2030.
Okay. So what I was gonna, so that doesn't really. I mean, we still obviously, in terms of dealing with carbon emissions and so on, we still obviously have to take actions beyond that. That's not gonna be solved entirely by solar power, right?
No, not entirely. So this is interesting. When Tesla launched its Model 3, Tesla Model 3, they pre-sold 275,000 cars in 4 days. That made it the most successful car launch ever in the history of the world. Not the most successful EV launch, it was that, but the most successful car launch. And now there are 400,000 people who've put down the deposit to get a Tesla Model 3, which means it was $17 billion of sales. So when you look at GM, In 2015, GM sold, what did they sell? They sold 10 million cars.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday at close of trading, they were worth $46 billion.
Wow.
Tesla only sold 50,000 cars in 2015. And at close of trading yesterday, it was worth $28 billion.
So there's a bigger multiple on the car.
When you do the math on that,
mm-hmm.
GM is being valued at $4,600 per vehicle,
mm-hmm.
and Tesla is being valued at $560,000 per vehicle it sells.
So is that implying that GM has no chance of catching up with Tesla due to its investment in, you know, the various technologies that go into Tesla? That's essentially.
Well, you know,
sorry.
GM used to have a guy who was in charge of their green car strategy.
Right.
His name was Bob Lutz, L-U-T-Z.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob admitted in a private briefing to analysts and to journalists that climate change is a crock of shit. That's an actual quote from Bob. Okay, now imagine you put Bob in charge of your green car strategy. How successful a sustainable car strategy do you think GM will have with Bob at the helm?
Sounds like he's not going to be super committed to getting it done.
You are right, Nick. Survey says.
So with the nuclear thing, I mean, I understand your what you're saying about the, you know, nuclear is obviously, I guess it's not improving its output that drastically, I'm assuming, whereas solar is. So the two lines are gonna, you know, they're gonna intersect at some point, and that point is what did you say, 7 years from now?
Seven doublings.
Seven doublings.
Seven doublings. Solar can be 100%. See, the solar in the future is not going to be the same as the solar today. They're now have thin film, like, you know, how the printing presses run newspaper through continuously. They're going to be continuously printing on those kind of printers, solar, thin film solar, which will clad the entire southern face of a building if the building's in the northern hemisphere.
Really?
And it'll be cheap, dramatically cheaper than what it is today. And the whole southern face of the building will become a solar collector.
That's pretty cool. So hang on. So I guess that's going to use a lot of silicon, right?
Well, the process is changing all the time.
So do we at some point? I mean, what is I have no idea really. So in terms of the resources to make things like solar panels, is there any limit on availability there, or is it kind of it's as much as we need to get is available?
We have a lot of sand in the world. But
yeah, I suppose you're right.
But the point that I'm trying to really make is that the technology is changing all the time, and solar panels won't need to be mounted the way they are now. They'll just clad an entire face of a building. In fact, there's a company here in Toronto called Morgan Solar that's working to turn every window in the world into a power generation.
Wow.
So imagine that your window, which you can see through, is actually generating power because it has very small particles in it that are solar collectors.
Okay. So we have a lot of sand in the world. I agree with that. Is there a massive cost of turning that sand into, I understand the technology will change, but is there a massive cost in changing that sand into something that can be used for solar panels, or is that not significant?
Well, as I just said, we had in I think it's in either Abu Dhabi or Dubai, I can't remember which, the lowest bid that came in for 100 megawatt project of solar power is 2.41 cents. Like, you can't buy wind for that. You can't buy nuclear for that. In fact, you're in the UK, am I correct?
I'm in Florida, but I'm from the UK originally.
From the UK. Well, you know about the $70 billion cost of decommissioning the nuclear plant over in the UK. $70 billion. It's like Dr. Evil. $1 billion. You know, it's outrageous. And that's never included in the cost of nuclear because they just assume the decommissioning is going to be free, and storing this highly radioactive waste for 250,000 years.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not going to cost us anything either. You know, when you have a solar spill, you know what they call it? A nice day.
How do you feel about technologies like wind power and things like that? Do you think that they are kind of, I mean, I guess the argument with nuclear is obviously that it's going to cost a lot more than we don't even account for. But wind power is also kind of expensive, right? Do you think that also is something that should be argued against in favor of working on solar?
Well, first off, nuclear really doesn't pay the full freight. You know, when you have an accident like Fukushima or 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl, the only people who pay for it are the taxpayers.
Yeah.
No insurance company will insure nuclear.
No,
the Fukushima cost is at 250 billion and rising. There are more than 100,000 people who've been evacuated and have never been able to return to their homes.
Yeah.
So think about building homes for 100,000 people. Think about the compensation for 100,000 people for their business. You know, it is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So it's going to go towards $500 billion, not even counted, all paid for by the Japanese taxpayer. That's not included in your electricity rates when they say nuclear only. Here in Ontario, they say nuclear only costs us 9 cents a kilowatt hour. But every project that they've ever built on nuclear has gone over budget, and the average over has been 2.5 times over. So, like, it is the most horrifically expensive form of energy, whereas solar is now the cheapest, which is why in North America, the ¡1 source of new electricity is solar already.
Makes sense. Well, as far as the wind power, though, do you nuclear aside, I'm very convinced now by your argument that nuclear is, you know, not anywhere near as much the energy of the future as some people would like to argue. But in terms of wind power and stuff, do you think that that's useful or?
Oh, absolutely.
You do.
If you look at Denmark, it has the highest penetration of wind power in the world, and it has a way of time shifting electricity. So first off, they export it if they have more than they need. So integrating your grids with other countries is a great thing. But they will heat up salts to very high temperatures, 2,500 degrees, and store those salts underground. So if you have excess electricity and your partner countries aren't buying it right now, you just store it in the form of heated melted salts underground. You bring it back when you want it, and then you run steam turbines and generate electricity. The other thing that they're very good for in Denmark is using excess heat for district heating. You see, the central way of doing electricity in North America and most around the world is whether it's nuclear, where you're burning uranium, or coal, you're burning coal, or gas, where you're having gas-fired turbines. 2/3 of the energy is wasted as heat up the smokestack, okay? But Denmark, they capture all that heat and use it to heat buildings, homes, hospitals, using an underground grid of heated steam.
Really?
So that all of a sudden
Never heard of that. It's amazing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this is why this podcast is so important for people to turn into.
Yes, I agree. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. So I'd never heard of that, and so the wind argument is, you know, I've heard a lot of people say that wind is very inefficient, but I guess it's inefficient where it's inefficient, and it can be made efficient.
So let's look at inefficiency. So you have nuclear, right? So we have 100 units of energy in the uranium we're going to burn, and we just lost 2/3 of that up the stack. But we have a centralized power generation model. So we generate in one place and then ship it by high voltage, high tension lines, and we lose 10% there. So we started with 100 units, we're down to 30 units. We then bring it into our homes. and we put it in an electric light bulb that's 100 years old called an incandescent bulb that uses 80% of the electricity to generate heat, not light. So we take our number of units down to actually 6 usable units of energy. So we started with 100 units of energy, and we ended up using only 6. So do you think the answer is to build more power plants?
Probably not. Probably not.
Right. If
yeah.
we were to first off capture all that heat, we'd triple the efficiency of generation and use it wisely. If we were to put in LED light bulbs instead of incandescents, we wouldn't need 5 times as much energy as we just pulled off the grid. And by the way, 27% of all electricity generated in North America is used for lighting. 100-year-old lighting, you know?
No, I just heard, I read an article actually that I think it was at MIT, they just made an incandescent bulb that was more efficient than LEDs. But I guess that's only in the lab.
Well, there we go. I've gone, in this house, we use LED lights.
Yeah, it's definitely I mean, it's definitely better than what's available on the market anyway. That makes sense.
You can get them now with rebates from your utility here in Ontario for $1 a bulb, like what looks like a normal bulb, incandescent bulb. So for $1 a month, your payback is less than a year. That's cool. The bulbs will last for 22 years. So I put in, as a homeowner, I put in 60 new bulbs, and that 60 new LEDs, and that is actually going to save me, I think I did the calculation as $4,000 over the next 15 years and $6,000 over the next 22 years, which is how long the bulbs will last. So, I went out and I spent $60, and I'm going to save $6,000. So is this really a hard decision to make for the homeowner?
That makes a lot of sense. I think, so I'm in Florida, and a few years ago, I was looking at, actually it was more than a few years ago, it was probably 10 years ago, I was looking at getting solar panels on my roof. And I remember finding a bunch of rebate programs and things like that were based in California. But there was nothing that really applied in Florida. Florida's not very friendly for solar and things like that. And you think it would be. I mean, we got plenty of sun. It seems incredibly wasteful. But yeah, so
in part, the reason why you don't have a solar-friendly jurisdiction is the Republican-controlled government wants to keep fossil fuels going to accelerate climate change, and therefore don't want their population to engage in the solar power of the future, because the Koch brothers have made large donations to Republicans in Florida because they want to retard the incredible acceleration of renewable adoption. So they're actually hurting the people of Florida, who could be saving hundreds of millions of dollars a year from their utility bills. So you can't get insurance if you're in Florida living on the coast for hurricanes, which have been made worse by climate change. So it's particularly ironic.
Well, Florida, we like to always do the smart thing here in Florida. Speaking of the Republicans, we've just switched over to well, I mean, everything is Republican in the U.S. now, isn't it? Pretty much. Are there any
not everything concerns? No, like California isn't, but
yeah. Well, California may not be part of the U.S. for much longer.
Yeah. The House, the Senate, and the presidency, as of January 21, will be.
I mean, it seems like there will be a focus on, in terms of energy, there will be a switch over to, coal and things like that. So, I mean, that must concern you.
Yes, but
what kind of impact does that have, though? Given that there must be a movement within industry to adopt solar and things like that. Do you think that at some point it's not going to matter what the government says?
Exactly right. I mean, when you can get solar for 2.41 cents per kilowatt hour, it really doesn't matter what the government says. Business is going to move that way because it's the cheapest alternative. And it really doesn't matter what the Republicans are doing. Elon Musk is charging ahead, building his...
Pretty much unstoppable, to be honest.
Exactly. So we have reached a tipping point in terms of the laws like Moore's law that governs computers. You know, my smartphone, which...
What was the name of the one that relates to solar? There was one that you mentioned in one of your talks that it wasn't Moore's law, but it was something. It was basically the similar thing, but...
Swanson's law.
Swanson's law, right.
So Swanson's law looks at the declining cost of solar. So back
40% a year, did you say?
It's let me see. With every doubling of capacity globally, the price falls in half. So back in 1970, the price of 1 watt of solar power was $100. It's now 30 cents and falling quickly. In fact, 30 cents was a 2015 figure. It's even lower now. So we see this dramatic decline in cost, and correspondingly, you see an exponential increase in uptake in capacity. So if you end up having some slides associated with this podcast afterwards, I'll flip you a couple of slides that are very powerful around
this. Thanks. Yeah, I'll link to them. We have a little comment section below. I'll just put little links in there and people can see that. So do you have a feel for where the efficiency gain is coming from? Because in computers, obviously, it's, you get the technology to put more transistors or more, computing, units of computation on a device. But in solar, is that because, what is the reason? They're just improving the chemistry behind the whatever layer it is that they use to absorb this to convert solar into electricity. You see, I'm obviously falling on my knowledge here.
So think about this. So it's improving on all fronts. So first off, the current solar panels are only about 20% efficient, meaning the total amount of energy that you get from the sun, it only captures 20% of it. But when you get a solar panel that captures 30%, you just became 50% more efficient. Are you with me on the math there?
Go over that again, sorry. So
you start, right now, we only have 20% efficiency.
Oh, you're 50%
when we go to 30% efficiency,
the
efficiency has improved by 50%.
I got you, yeah, I'm with you on that, yeah.
So given the huge volume of installation, if you're doubling every 2 years and the entire new round of panels that are put in globally over the next 2 years are 50% more efficient, that really does a lot to your capacity. You're with me on the math there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also, when we install a set of solar panels right now, the solar panel that I put on my roof, you need to kind of make sure that your roof is supportive enough for that level of weight. But once we move to thin film solar that weighs nothing and you just hang it and affix it to the southern face of your building, all of a sudden, the cost of installing it just dropped by 80 or 90%. So all of a sudden, you have solar panels that are more efficient and at the same time cost less. All of a sudden, the overall cost of solar declined exponentially.
So, but in terms of the actual efficiency of the solar panel, is that coming from? Is it coming from, like, let's say you've got a band in which it absorbs a good amount of light, I guess. Are they expanding that band, or are they making it broader, like going for more visible light, more infrared and stuff like that, or is it actually extracting more from within one band? Or I guess it's both. It must be both, right?
So they're improving on all fronts, but for our audience, this is getting a little too much into the weeds. I work at the 50,000 foot level.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I was a chemistry major, so I'm a little bit of a nerd for this kind of stuff, although I've forgotten most of it. We can shift topics now if it's all right. I'm interested in your thoughts on how people can predict how can people predict where to go? How can they see how to skate towards the puck? And I don't know how much time you have left, by the way, Jim. So give me
that's just what I was looking at, because I do think I have another thing in a couple of minutes here.
Oh, sure.
So one of the ways you can look at things. So in 1998, I was on my honeymoon, and we went to Nepal, just north of India.
Beautiful.
And at the time, I wanted to make a phone call back to Canada, and the going rate was 300 rupees a minute. That's the local currency. But I went into a computer store, and I got on a computer, and I used VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, and I made a call for 10 rupees a minute. So instead of 300 rupees a minute, 30 times less.
Yep.
Now, being the super smart guy that I am, I compared 300 rupees a minute to 10 rupees, and I said, I know which way over time the market is going to move.
Sure.
So I predicted that by 2005, phone calls in North America would be free. Now, this was a very poor country, Nepal, and at the time, VoIP wasn't fully duplexed, meaning it was more like a radio, a walkie-talkie. You talked, and the other person couldn't talk. They had to listen. And then at the end, you'd lift the buttons, or before you go over and lift the button, and now the other person knows once they hear over, they can talk. So it wasn't duplexed yet. So people aren't going to use it quite yet. It's not quite there, but I knew given time, the 30x difference would result in the technology improving. So I predicted by 2005, phone calls were free, and I was off by 2 years because in 2003, we had Skype. And here we are talking for free using video for free over the internet. So, I mean, you know, when grandparents now Skype with their grandkids, you know, the grandkids can't imagine talking to them by phone. Why? Because I want to see grandpa and grandma, you know. So it really has changed everything. But if you want to be a brilliant futurist, find small trends that are growing exponentially. If they're doubling every 2 years, the solar penetration, and it gets to 1%, I'm telling you right now, I am predicting. You can record this and star it. You know,
we
prosperity.
are recording it. It's going in our little.
Once in 2 years, you know, once solar goes to 2% of global supply, in 2 years you can go, that Harris guy was right. And once it goes to 4% in, you know, 4 years from now, exactly. And at 2030, when we're all only using solar and there is no such thing as nuclear, you can go, how did that Harris guy know? Well, it's pretty simple. You just look at the pattern. If it's doubling every 2 years for 40 years and the trend is continuing, it will overtake the entire market. There, that is the secret to being a prescient, brilliant futurist.
Very cool. Very cool. That's a note to go.
Not that I'm a prescient, brilliant futurist. I'm just, if I were, that would be one of the tricks I'd use.
I think you're a prescient, brilliant futurist. Well, listen, man. I know you got a jet, but I really enjoyed talking with you. I'd like to talk to you again at some point, but we'll discuss that offline. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Is there anything you'd like to shout out?
If you're on Twitter, on Twitter I'm at Jim Harris. So follow me on Twitter.
Right.
I'm interested in disruptive innovation. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well. So if you send me a LinkedIn request, mention the fact that you saw the saw this podcast.
Cool.
And yeah, I'd love to be on again.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Good luck with your next thing, and we'll speak soon.
Look forward to it.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.